Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the meticulous and honestly totally bizarre step-by-step forensic investigation into Michael Jackson's tragic passing. When we think of high-profile cases, our minds usually go straight to those dramatic courtroom showdowns, right? But today, we're going behind the scenes. We're looking at the gritty, detailed forensic work that actually builds those cases from the ground up. We're going to see exactly how detectives piece together a puzzle when the initial clues make absolutely zero sense. So let's just dive right into it.
This whole thing kicks off not with an obvious crime, but with a frantic 911 call. If you look at the wording here, the caller simply reports a 50-year-old male in cardiac arrest. That's it. So for the first responders, this sounded like a totally viable patient. They're thinking, okay, if we get there fast enough, we can save this guy. They had absolutely no idea they were walking into Michael Jackson's home, and they definitely didn't know they were about to step into one of the most baffling scenes they'd ever encounter.
Right, so paramedics rush into this opulent Carrollwood house, and they are hit with a scene that is just chaotic. It immediately screams that this is not your standard medical emergency. First off, the room is blisteringly hot because there's a roaring fireplace going in the middle of the day. Then there's this bare-bones medical setup, an IV stand, a saline bag, just random medications strewn all over the place. And to make it even stranger, there's a lifelike doll sitting on the bed, plus Post-it notes with poems and lyrics taped to the mirrors. First responders are looking around like, what 50-year-old guy is lying in bed at noon in a makeshift medical suite like this?
Now, despite how weird all of that was, police initially treated this as a standard death investigation. I mean, there was no bloody knife, no smoking gun. It honestly looked like a tragic medical event. But then the suspicion really starts to build. Dr. Conrad Murray, who was the only doctor present at the scene and actually rode with Jackson to the hospital, well, he just vanishes. While the media is swarming outside, Murray slips away from the hospital. Detectives are trying to reach him, and it's going straight to voicemail. You gotta ask yourself, why on earth would the primary physician just disappear like that? So, back at that chaotic bedroom, investigators are just trying to make heads or tails of the mess. And then they stumble upon a tiny but absolutely massive discovery. They find a small discarded bottle that had rolled under a moving nightstand. Now, the detective on the scene, he actually had zero medical background. None. He literally had to go ask his neighbor, who happened to be a doctor, hey, what exactly is this stuff? It really just goes to show how the smallest, easiest to miss detail can completely flick the trajectory of an entire investigation. And that brings us to the ultimate game changer. They find out that bottle contains Propofol. Now, if you don't know what this drug is, it is absolutely crucial to understand it. Propofol is a heavy surgical anesthetic. We're talking about the stuff used to put people completely under for major hospital surgeries. It is literally never meant for residential use. No way. This discovery forces a pretty shocking interview with Dr. Murray, who just freely admits that, yeah, for months he'd been giving Jackson this surgical anesthetic night after night just to help him sleep. To put this into perspective, the sheer medical malpractice here is just staggering. In a real hospital, Propofol is given through a continuous drip, precisely calibrated by electronic pumps, with a whole team monitoring every single vital sign. But Murray's setup? It was like a nightmare. He used a basic, gravity-fed IV with a manual roller clamp. And get this, he actually slit open a saline bag, hid the Propofol vial inside it, and hung it up. No monitors, nothing. He was literally administering a lethal anesthetic with the precision of a leaky garden hose, intentionally hiding it in this wild, makeshift rig. But that begs the question, where was the rest of his equipment? Detectives pull surveillance footage from the mansion, and they clearly see Murray carrying a medical bag inside before the death, but they couldn't find it. When they finally corner Murray and ask him, hey, where's the bag with all the syringes and vials? He gets this total deer-in-the-headlights look. Turns out, he thought the police had already found it. And the moment he realizes they haven't, you can basically see the panic set in. By combing through phone records and witness statements, investigators actually map out this chilling minute-by-minute timeline of a cover-up. So Murray administers the Propofol, right? Then he literally just walks away. He leaves a deeply vulnerable patient completely unmonitored so he can go send some emails and take phone calls in another room. It's only while he's on the phone that he notices his patient isn't breathing. But here is the most damning part. At minute 22, instead of immediately screaming for help, he pauses life-saving CPR to round up medical vials and hide his trash. It takes him over 20 minutes to finally tell security to call 911.
And because Murray made that massive mistake of assuming the police already had his bag, he accidentally tipped them off on where to look. Detectives go back to the house, and boom, they find the missing bag hidden high up in a closet cubby in a totally different room. Inside, they find a literal treasure trove of evidence. We're talking hidden vials of propofol, lidocaine, used syringes, empty bottles, and bagged up medical waste. This was the exact trash that Murray had prioritized hiding over saving his own patient's life.
Now, the physical evidence was bad, but the internal evidence, that was just undeniable. Toxicology comes back confirming Jackson had a completely lethal dose of propofol in his system. One expert literally said it was enough to drop a rhinoceros. But there was another detail that is just haunting. Detectives found a full urination bottle right by the bed. This meant Jackson wasn't just being given a little help to sleep, he was being kept in a completely, recklessly incapacitated state, unable to even get up to go to the bathroom. He was basically under deep general anesthesia without a breathing tube, totally defenseless.
Okay, so at this point, the cops know exactly how Jackson died, but they desperately need to figure out where these massive quantities of a strictly regulated hospital drug are coming from. The witnesses, including Murray's girlfriend, are completely uncooperative. The police serve a warrant on her apartment and it's wiped clean, not a single trace of Murray. But then, they catch a crazy lucky break. A single tiny pharmacy receipt had accidentally slipped down behind a bookcase, and that one little piece of paper, it blew the whole shebang wide open.
That receipt sends detectives marching straight to a pharmacy. And when they pull the records, the numbers are just mind-blowing. 5 gallons. Dr. Murray had ordered over 5 gallons of propofol and had it shipped directly to his girlfriend's apartment over just a few months. To put that into perspective for you, there is absolutely zero legitimate medical reason for any private doctor to have 5 gallons of surgical anesthetic sent to a residential address. None. So you gotta ask, why? Why in the world would a doctor risk his medical license, his freedom, and his patient's life to do this? To figure that out, detectives start executing search warrants across state lines, hitting up his medical practices and homes in Vegas and Houston. By digging into his business and personal life, they uncover a motive that is just rooted in pure financial desperation. Murray was trying to keep up this incredibly lavish lifestyle that was quickly crashing down around him. Look at the financial documents. They showed that Murray had landed this incredibly lucrative contract with AEG, the promoters for Jackson's comeback tour. This contract promised him an eye-watering $150,000 a month just to be the private tour doctor. I mean, this was the gig of a lifetime, right? Jackson demanded a private doctor, and Murray was the guy willing to give Jackson whatever he wanted, including propofol, just to make sure that contract didn't disappear. And he needed that money desperately. Murray was completely drowning in debt. He had multiple kids by different women, a crazy history of blowing cash at adult entertainment venues, and just huge liabilities. Like, for example, he had a $10,000 monthly mortgage on a house in Vegas that he had literally just stopped paying. He was backed into a financial corner, the walls were closing in, and that AEG contract was his only lifeline. He had the motive, and that suffocating pressure completely destroyed his medical judgment.
So now the forensic timeline, the toxicology, the financial motives, they're all lining up perfectly. But the pressure on the LAPD was just immense. You have to remember the history here. The shadow of past failures hung heavy over the department. They were all thinking about the O.J. Simpson trial, where they had this mountain of evidence but still lost the conviction. They knew the entire world was watching them right now, and they absolutely could not afford to drop the ball. Even though the LAPD strongly believed this level of gross negligence deserved a second-degree murder charge, the DA's office made a super controversial call. It was an election year, right? And the DA did not want to risk another highly publicized, devastating loss in court. So they took the safer route. They charged Dr. Murray with involuntary manslaughter instead. It's a charge that basically just requires proving gross negligence rather than malicious intent, so a much lower bar. It definitely frustrated the investigators, but it was a battle they knew for sure they could win. And they did win. When it was all said and done, that meticulous, step-by-step gathering of evidence, from that little dropped bottle to the crumpled receipt behind the bookcase, it led directly to a guilty verdict. Murray served his time. But honestly, the biggest, most permanent victory for the investigators was that the conviction completely stripped Dr. Murray of his medical license in every single state. He would never, ever legally practice medicine again. The system, sticking purely to the facts, actually worked. But there's this really fascinating postscript to all of this. Years after the trial, one of the lead detectives is driving home, stops at a red light, and glances over at the car next to him. And locking eyes with him is a now free Dr. Conrad Murray,
just cruising around in a nice Mercedes, going about his life. And it kind of leaves us with this profound question as we wrap up this explainer. When someone commits an act of negligence this massive and abandons their duties so recklessly for a paycheck, do you ever really let it go? Do you give someone like that a second chance? It's something those investigators still think about to this day. And it's a question I'm going to leave you to ponder. Thanks for diving into the evidence with me.